Hi there, welcome to Considering Comic Books. And this episode we're going to be talking to a good friend of mine, Eric Peterson. He had to actually message me this because my brain isn't functioning properly. I kept getting his surname wrong, and this is like the third take on the opening of the podcast. So his name is Eric Peterson. He's a good mate of mine. We met at Lawgiver, the Bristol Comic Con. It's everything Dread related, and we bonded over our shared love of 2000 AD. He's written some great stuff. His first work was Jesus Christ in the Name of the Gun, which you should check out. Really good satire, allegory. And his current work is Space Bastards, which reminds me a lot of, having read the first issue, it reminds me a lot of Keith Gethin era Lobo, that sort of flavour to it. And it has some big names, some real legendary creators in the form of Darrick Robertson. You'll know him from The Boys, Transmetropolitan, and obviously the legendary Simon Bizley's involved, Slain, ABC Warriors, Heavy Metal, you name it. The Biz has been in so many publications now. So Eric, it's really great to have you on the podcast. Man, tell us about Space Bastards. Tell us what you're working on at the minute and how that's going.
Yeah, thanks, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, Space Bastards is weird for me in the fact that it's I'll give you the quick premise real quick, and then we can talk about.
Yeah, sure. Give me the synopsis.
Yeah. So in the future, it's really hard to get packages between planets. Like virtually 80% of packages don't make it. And so the Postmaster General comes up with the idea, kind of on the verge of bankruptcy. If I just arm the postal service, if I make it to where whoever delivers the package gets the cash, and a postal worker can use any means necessary to steal that package from other postal workers for themselves, then these guys will be so busy, killing each other and all that, getting the package to where it needs to go, that nobody else will interfere. And you tell guys, you make it a competition. And you say, hey, you get this thing to where it goes, and everybody else is going to be trying to kill you for it, and that package will get to where it has to go. And originally Space Bastards was mostly made up of ex-convicts and stuff like that, but really, very, very shortly after this new kind of regime launched, it ended up kind of just attracting every disenfranchised person in the galaxy. So, you've got accountants who have been laid off one too many times. You've got guys who have, divorced, ex-real estate agents, stuff like that, So it really turns into being kind of like a hodgepodge of people doing this as their job. They'd rather be shot at for a living than sit in a cubicle,
Well, funny, it really reminded me of a lot of those free road style trucker movies that I'd watched during the 70s and 80s, right? And what appealed to me about it a lot was the first issue that I read. The main character he was kind of a Poindexter. He worked in an office. He'd been let go, and he had to find, a new job. So he ends up going into the application process as a postal worker. And in a way, it had that sort of free-spirited 1970s vibe. That I saw in a lot of American cinema, and that's why I referenced Keith Geffin's Lobo. It feels like sort of space trucking, and I love that sort of stuff. Really, it had a great sort of set of characters. I can't remember he was this huge big dude with sort of spikes on his head. He was like an alien, and he's teamed up with the main protagonist for the first episode, and I loved him. I just, it was endlessly entertaining, and conceptually, it just appeals to that part of me that loves really cult sci-fi,
Oh, good. Oh, I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I mean, I think there is some of that stuff in there. I think the two, specifically for that issue that you read, which is, I think in most cases, kind of the first issue we would always recommend people to start with.
Yeah.
I think definitely myself and my co-writer Joe Aubrey. I think when we were coming up with how to walk people through the postal service, there were like kind of two main influences. I don't know why, but I know Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Specifically, like the opening, specifically the Jack Burton, like the credit sequence where he's talking on the walkie-talkie or on the CB radio and stuff. I know that for some reason kind of stuck with us. And the other thing too is Repo Man. You know, like that whole thing when the guy shows up and they're like, you know, they're giving Emilio Estevez like the walkthrough of everything, and you know, the guy says that he takes him on like a ride along. Yeah. And he tells Emilio like, you know, most people spend their entire lives trying to get themselves out of uncomfortable situations. And Repo Man will do anything he can to get himself into those situations. You know. Do you know?
Funny, I thought Repo Man was one of your influences, but I didn't want to say anything. Sure, because you know I love that movie too. It's one of the Emilio Estevez, Harry Dean Stanton. It's one of those great cult movies of the 1980s, and also Big Trouble in Little China, another amazing John Carpenter cult classic. You know, Big Jack and the Pork Chop Express. I love that film. I love that film, and it's, you know. So I guess this is why it really resonates, and you know, I think it's gonna do really well. I can't wait for people to get to read it, because I read the first episode and I was like, I love this. I can't wait to. It's what way are you guys gonna do it? Are you gonna Kickstart it, or is it subscription based?
Well, so I'll kind of give you a little bit of background. Space Bastards is a really, really unique project in the fact that. You know, I think around the time I was like 13 or 14, I decided I wanted to do visual storytelling. And one of the very first comics I did in my English class in like 6th grade was something called Davy Proton. And basically, it bared like no resemblance to Space Bastards now, except for the fact that the character kind of carried through. And but basically, it was just an excuse. Like, one of the first things I remember drawing or a story trying to tell was like, I just want to like talk about a whole bunch of Han Solos, you know? Yeah. Like, if I could do anything right now at this age, I would just want to be Han Solo in space.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to have a spaceship, want to blast around, hang out in bars, get myself into trouble, all that stuff. And then, fast forward quite a few years later, and kind of by that point, kind of my comic influences had pretty firmly been like 2000 AD, Transmetropolitan, pretty much 2000 AD, and then really like the Vertigo line from DC.
Okay.
What I grew up on, and
the Edge.
And like kind of like shaped my mind. And then I was in film school. I was like 16, 17, and we were building. I decided to make a Davy Proton movie, and we were building spaceship sets in my backyard and stuff.
Awesome.
And me and my best friend who kind of got involved, like we kind of realized. You know, we could spend all the money in the world on these movies, but they're always going to not look how we want them to look for, you know, this kind of budget. And then we realized, like, you know, by this point I was kind of doing other comics anyway. I had done that Jesus Christ book and stuff, and met with, like, kind of just a, you know, moderate success with that. And I was like, well, you know, if we take, you know, if we really, you know, we really could do this as a comic and, you know, make a long story short, basically, eventually Darrick kind of got involved, and, you know, we set out just to make this, like, 6-issue miniseries. And then about a year ago, we really realized, like, we have, like, let's just try telling some other stories off the beaten path a little bit. And then we realized, like, we have a full universe here. I mean, this is ridiculous. We have as much fun telling standalone stories as we do, like, a big, you know, TV season worth of, you know, arc, you know, like of structure. And so then we came up with the idea of doing it, releasing it that way. So basically next year, Space Bastards comes out. There's a hardcover anthology. You have to, in order to get the book in that format, where it's a hardcover anthology, you basically have to become a Space Bastards. You have to sign up on the site, spacebastards.com. You go there, you sign up. Right now it's just a newsletter but basically we launch pre-orders here in the coming months. But you sign up to be a Space Bastards, which means you actually get like an online profile on our social media site. You get to fight other Space Bastards for deliveries and stuff. And then you get basically mailed the quarterly hardcover and kind of this boutique set. The packages actually for the book itself come packaged like they are from the series itself, kind of like a cool collector's package.
That's really awesome, by the way. I mean, I've signed up, and I love the format. And plus, I like stuff in hardcover. I've been getting
I do
the
too.
yeah, it's my preferred format. I mean, I've been getting the 2000 AD Mega Collection. I've
Oh,
been
it's great. Yeah, me too.
dude, it's so good. I've been getting the Transformers stuff from IDW,
Yeah.
the big oversized hardcovers. They're just great.
Do you do like the ID? I'm actually reading those right now. Funny as it is.
Oh, they're great.
The IDW collection, like the
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, all that Simon Furman stuff at the start.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't read the Furman stuff. I came in later with the James Roberts, More Than
Okay.
Meets the Eye and Lost Light stuff, and it was a friend who'd sort of hassled me into it. But it is just some really tight sci-fi writing and universe building. So it took the Transformers mythology and blew it up into something enormous. It's got this real weight to it now, whereas formerly it was. I think it was an interesting concept, but it was always quite flimsy. Now it's got this real history and weight to it.
So you're talking actually about when Simon. So there's two different Simon Furman Transformers, right? There's like his original.
Yeah, his
novels,
original run. Yeah,
and then there's the IDW thing where basically IDW pulled him in, I think, to kind of help construct kind of a modern.
yeah, to reboot it.
Yeah. So are you talking about the reboot?
Well, I'm talking about the reboot, but I do love his original stuff as well.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. Like I'm in the same boat. I love his original stuff, but like that IDW reboot. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just really it helps build out that universe.
Yeah.
So well.
Yeah, and that seems to be what you were doing with Space Bastards, and it's something that I love. Now, as a writer myself, my favorite things to do are character work. I love character work, and I love basically designing different types of people. But what I really love in other writers is world building, and you seem to have that nailed down.
Well, thank you. But that's kind of what happened. So, I mean, we had the opportunity a year ago. I kind of got hit with this, where I was like, this isn't like a mini series. This is like a whole thing we could do. Because and bear with me too. I'm still kind of hashing this out a little bit.
Sure.
I'm hashing out the pitch
sure.
in my mind. But for me, Space Bastards could be technically more than a comic. It could actually be kind of this weird little cult in universe social experience as well, where you have the books that come out and everything, all written by us.
Yeah.
There's not like a team of writers. It's all pretty much hand cared for by us. You've got Darrick's big arc. You've got other stories here by the likes of Colin MacNeil.
Yeah. Oh, great.
And Simon Bizley, Clint Langley as well.
Clint Langley's involved. Oh man, you have got a who's who of British artistic talent lined up right there, man.
Well, and that's the thing too is like, and I think I'm trying. I'm going back over American comics as well because I don't necessarily want this to become, Eric Peterson's favorite 2080 artist. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But admittedly, I mean, like I grew up on all that stuff, and so for me, those are the guys I love.
Yeah, sure.
And Darrick as well. And
well, listen, dude, if you've got the opportunity, and I mean, I say this all the time to people, I am of the opinion, right, that, unless you're a Buddhist, you don't think we're coming back, you only get one chance, and I think if you've got the opportunity to do the things you really want to do, tick all those things off the bucket list, if you've got that opportunity, then you have to do it, and in this case, you've got the option to work with these great guys, guys whose work you love and you grew up on. Man, you have to do it, and you're doing it. So more power to you.
There is kind of just to clarify too, there is kind of a process here as well. I mean, me and my co-writer will kind of debate that too. There's other names where we'll be like, we'll be like, dude, I love this guy. Yeah. And then we kind of sit there and go like, well, but are they a good fit actually for this? And then it actually, there's also kind of another side of it too. Like, when Simon got involved, we really kind of took the outline for the issue the first issue he was involved in and kind of tilted it on its head because we're like, well, this is a Simon issue. So what's the best Space Bastards story we have for Simon here?
Yeah.
And we've done that kind of the cool thing about these little, like, these other stories where the other artists are involved is it gives us a chance to do that. Like, same thing with Colin. I've known Colin maybe for about 2 years now, and really good friend of mine. I like him a lot, and it was the same thing. I'd kind of look at Colin's outline and be like, yeah, he's good for this one.
Yeah.
And, I think story would play to his strengths, and we kind of try to do that across the board, and kind of try and figure out, like, all right, out of our own group of space bastards here, Colin, Clint, Darrick, and Boo Cook's actually doing some covers for us.
Oh, right, all right, yeah.
And that we have that's not it too. I mean, there's other people involved, but but out of our group of space masters, like who's good for what? It's really a lot of fun to kind of cater this and try to make it the best it can be.
And all these guys have really, a lot of them have done work in that genre as well. Colin, obviously, Nemesis the Warlock. Bizley, he's been on Lobo. Darrick Robertson, Transmet. And Boo Cook, he did Elephant Man. And all of these are staple, sci-fi stuff. It's just all really beautifully rendered alternative worlds. So the fact that you've got these guys in your play box, essentially, that is just a coup, man. And we should say to people, you're funding this yourself, aren't you? You guys are putting it together. And
yeah, we ran a Kickstarter way back in the beginning, in like 2014. But really, that Kickstarter was actually, the project bears like no resemblance. Like that Kickstarter basically gave us $6,000 and funded essentially like what was at the time going to be an 80-page comic.
Yeah.
And right now I can tell you Darrick Robertson's story is like Darrick Robertson's story runs through the first year of annuals and of annual hardcovers. And like his story is like 200. It's like over 200 pages.
Whoa.
And that's just that. And we have equally probably about just as much material, give or take. With all these other artists as well. So yeah, it's pretty much it's self-funded. Yeah.
Yeah,
clarify though, because I don't want to upset anybody. I was very thankful for our successful Kickstarter. So.
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely. It sort of formed the foundation for what you would go on to do. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but it's not like it's a hard thing because it's like really also that by now that Kickstarter basically is funded like a fraction of what we're doing,
Yeah. I have to give you guys your dues because, to put together a team like that and to fund it yourself and to be putting it out, I think the landscape has shifted in comics recently and you guys are riding the cusp of a wave. Now, this is something I've been talking to people about and, there seems to be more and more excitement coming from the idea of people putting their own stuff out because it seems to me it's very difficult to go through the traditional route nowadays. It's very difficult to get in. The companies, I'm sure there's, this all comes down to a theory I have. I'll tell you very briefly. If you think about 100 years ago, you had great writers who would pop up and you'd know who they all were, right? So, you would go, oh, there's a Charles Dickens or, there's a Virginia Woolf or, there's a Leo Tolstoy, whoever it was. You could pick them out. And then the Industrial Revolution happened and to sidestep, all the nuances and intricacies of that, our population multiplied by 600%, right? So we went from having like 1 billion people on the planet to 7 billion people on the planet. And I think that plays, this is just my own conspiracy tinfoil hat theory, right? I think that plays a massive part in trying to get into, comic book industries or any jobs really. The fact that the competition now is like, so fierce. It's so fierce. But because so many options have opened up in terms of digital production, you can now put your own stuff out there and you've got the ability to carve your own niche as a creator and do something really interesting, unique, original and bring in, like what you're doing, some really big names in comics and do something awesome, be your own boss,
Yeah, so I thank you. And there's actually, again, conspiracy theory stuff here, but we do all this market research and we try to figure out, like, all right, how many books, how many units, how many members do we need to have in the Postal Service here?
Yeah.
Self-sustaining and all that, because we'll keep it going. We need to keep this going. It's like my life dream to do this book. So
yeah.
But a buddy of mine actually kind of scared me recently. Somebody I really respect in the comic industry, and he said he's got like a new publication out himself, and he's like, actually, what we're doing is we're not fighting. Like, it's competitive, but all you're trying to do is really you're trying to take hold of what is a very, very, very small demographic in the population.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I know what you mean, man. Like ages 18 to 35, and he goes, no, I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm saying people who read.
Yeah, you're absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah. Oh, man,
we think about it all the time. We think about well, comics. Surely people read comics because we got all these Marvel movies and all the comic book movies. It's like the biggest thing in the world right now, and everything makes like $1 billion. But that's not necessarily an indication that people are going out there and actually like sit down at the end of the day and read a comic. You know what I mean? Well, and understand that you and I are probably dealing a little bit with two different audiences too. I do think that U.S. readers are a little bit different than UK readers as well.
Oh, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, well, it's funny actually because, there's a couple of different markets, and the US and the UK are the smallest. Europe has massive sales. Yeah, massive, insane. They've got an insane graphic novel market. And those guys, I mean, I read a couple of European things like Humanoids, put out a lot of good books. There's another company, oh God, Delcourt. Yeah, Delcourt. They put out a lot of good stuff. Like guys like Barry Windsor Smith and Juan Jimenez and these really amazing artists. Like the art on this stuff is mind-boggling. It's so good, but they have a different model that they work off. And it's similar to what you're doing actually, in that it comes out sort of. It would almost be annually. You would get a graphic novel coming out from a team, and oh, sorry, that was the cat. The graphic novel would come out from this team, and they get I think they get an advance, and then they they do the same thing for next year. So it's funny. Europe is a massive market, but Asia is the biggest because it has comics for everybody. Just a massive range. So the US and the UK market really operate to a very niche amount of customers for one thing, but also I think in the digital age where people are moving more and more towards Netflix streaming, Amazon Prime, watching stuff on YouTube, it's like when we were kids. I remember going into the corner shop, and that's where you would get your comics.
Yeah.
And the comics industry really made, I think it was a terrible move, but then again, I'm not marketing, so I can't really say, but they stopped putting newsstand editions of stuff out. And I don't know why they did that, because that's how I got hooked into comics.
Right. So, and you've already, let me just clarify something real quick. Have you always been in Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, well, I live in Ireland. I live in Belfast, right? But I have travelled, so I've been to different places, and I've seen how they, I've went to a comic shop in every city I've ever been in, So
well, the reason I ask is that's something that always kind of like I've always been envious of, is the fact that you could find 2000 AD. I don't know if it's still this way, but you could typically find 2000 AD or the magazine like on the news rack. Like,
yeah.
Like for us in America, it would be like where they have like the tabloids and like, or they used to have TV Guide, when you're like, you're checking out at the store, back like a long time ago, you would always see dime novels. You would always see dime novels. You see Robert E. Howard stuff there or whatever. That kind of, and then I think that kind of opened the door for like, there's going to be like, a little spindle of comics there as well.
Yeah.
We don't have that at all in the U.S. anymore. Like that has gone the way of the ghost. So.
Same. It would be some of the bigger stores. Like, I mean, you used to be able to go into your corner store and you would come across, like 2000 AD, the magazine, little British publications like the Beano and the Dandy. I think maybe they're still there, but now you have to go to like a bigger store like W.H. Smith or, Eason's or somewhere like that to come across these publications, so it has to be sort of a bit more specialized than walking down the street and going to, your local corner shop. So, I think it needs to get back into those little places because, man, not only is reading something that I feel kids are falling behind on. I mean, I don't just feel that. I mean, statistically, kids are falling behind on reading. They've got so many other distractions nowadays. But, and I mean, that makes me sound like a conscientious adult, but really it's all about drawing people into what I feel is a wonderful industry, but hobby, a lifestyle. Drawing people into comics. I mean, it didn't just make me a more voracious reader, but it gives you a real appreciation for beautiful artwork,
Well, that's kind of the thing, is that was sort of what I was getting at. I was wondering, like, the way I found 2000 AD and Judge Dredd was when I was like 12 or 13 years old, the Stallone movie came out.
Yeah, okay.
And, obviously it's criticized and stuff like that, but I mean, like, the bottom line is for a 12 or 13-year-old, that movie's perfect.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
It's great. I mean, it's got, if you don't know anything about the property or whatever,
yeah,
you're like, wow, this is really fun. And then I think maybe like a week later, like 2 weeks later, my grandma worked next door to a comic shop in another state, and she was like, "What do you want for comics? Like, I'm gonna send you some comics for Christmas." And I was like, "Judge Dredd. Ask them if they have any Judge Dredd." And she sent me over like all those like Bizley reprints.
Yeah.
And, like, but it was all the U.S. It was not the actual Prague. It was like the the American reprints that were happening during the 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just got like a big bag of those. And one of those was like America, which I think like totally informed my. It was a big, it totally changed my life. With Colin MacNeil.
Yeah.
And
who you're now working with,
I'm sorry.
Who you're now working with.
Yeah, it's been crazy, man. I mean, admittedly, it's been crazy. But real quick, just to finish that thought, though, is like I was thinking back on this with what you were saying just now, and I don't know if it would be even remotely possible for me to find new stuff that same way anymore.
It's not, and I mean, it really isn't. I mean, right, I came across, I got into comics. I read little UK comics for kids, the Beano and the Dandy, and they're like an institution in the UK, okay?
Sure.
And, and from there I segued into, I found stuff like the Ninja Turtles was popular at the time, so I was reading the Archie comics, Ninja Turtles.
Oh, yeah. I did that too.
Oh,
yeah.
Dude.
I got it in Mirage, several years later.
Yeah,
by the way, I'm interviewing Kevin Eastman like in one of these days here too,
dude.
in like next week or something.
Kevin Eastman is a really nice dude. I met him once. I met him in Dublin. Ryan Brown invited me down to meet him, and I met Kevin Eastman and his wife, and Freddie Williams the third. He's the guy who does all the Thundercats He-Man crossover stuff, a lot of DC Ninja Turtle stuff. He is a lovely guy. So I got to meet those dudes, and Kevin Eastman is a really nice guy, but his pardon me, I read his...
Hey, Ryan's a really nice guy too. If Ryan is listening to this, or if anybody's familiar with Ryan's work, he's one of my favorite people as well. I love Ryan.
Oh man, he's gonna come on the podcast on Ryan essentially got me into writing comics, right? I was writing novels, and he's what drew me into writing comics. And he's going to come on the podcast. I think he's on. I think I'm talking to him on Saturday. So he's got some big news, but he's super cagey about saying anything political because we live in these sort of puritanical political times at the minute, where if you say anything too edgy, you're going to go down the James Gunn memory hole. They're just gonna you're just gonna get cut out. So he doesn't want to say anything that would potentially jeopardize his burgeoning career in comics. So I've been warned in advance. Don't ask me any awkward questions.
Right.
I was like, cool, no problem, man, I won't do it. But
I saw Ryan in San Diego. First off, I found out about a week before San Diego Comic-Con that Simon Bizley was going to be at the show.
Oh yeah.
And this was just after we had kind of, to put some perspective on this dude. The deal with Simon happened maybe shortly after that.
Oh, sure.
So there's a whole crazy comic book fan gushing story behind that as well that you were actually kind of in the periphery of.
Oh, really?
Well. Yeah, and then but then basically I find out like a few weeks later, like a week before Comic-Con, I'm like, oh, holy crap, like Simon's going to be there. And and I'm like, so that'll be good. I'll get together with Simon. So I do. I end up getting together with Simon, and he's like, I got a panel in 2 hours. I'm not even going to try to do a Simon impression, and it'll be really
he sort of, how does he speak? He speaks like this here. It's very, he speaks like this. It's me, it's busy. That's kind of how he talks, isn't it?
Yeah, so I meet with Simon, we're having like a good time and all this stuff. We're cracking jokes. He's honestly like, even if I was never doing a comic book with these guys, if these guys didn't even work in the comic book industry, I would still get along with them. They're
great to hang out with.
Yeah, I just always, I don't know, like, and all in different ways too. But Colin, Simon, like the guys who I've really had a chance to kind of hang out with that I work with, and it's been wonderful. And but anyways, I sit there and I walk over with Simon to this panel, and it's a panel about Simon, and we're waiting or whatever, and right there, like Ryan walks up right next to me. I had no idea Ryan was going to be in San Diego, so it was good to bump into him too.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, he was. I think he's going to make a thing of going over every year. But it is, man, the only thing that puts me off is it's crazy expensive, and I think whenever I maybe a bit more established with my own stuff, I'll go over and try and do a bit of schmoozing and networking. But until then, I'm happy enough to watch it from afar. But it's one of those amazing spectacles that I'd love to go over and see, just because the sheer numbers of people flooding into it, it looks astronomical.
You have to see it at least once. I've been exhibiting at San Diego Comic-Con now for, I want to say, 18 years.
Wow.
Or no, next year will be my 18th year.
18 years.
Yeah, and I mean, it's weird. It's a weird feeling nowadays for me, because it's just kind of like I'm a lifer now, where it's like, the spectacle, I've seen it grow, all that stuff. Now it's kind of like whenever I have to walk through those crowds of people, it's not like a spectacle at all to me. I'm just like, please, I'm sweaty. Let me out of here.
Yeah, it's just another day at San Diego Comic-Con for you.
Yeah. But it's like, the bigger thing is, now that I think about it, I saw Ryan. The first time I ever met Ryan was at San Diego last year. And he was partying with a bunch of other 2000 AD guys.
Yes, okay.
And then, but yeah, no, you never know who you're going to see at the show. It's always a lot of fun.
So, what about I'd heard somebody told me that it was it smaller this year, a bit more contained, or was that just hearsay? Was it as massive as always?
I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off pretty much the whole time, because I had a lot of meetings, and then at the same time, like I had to kind of like make sure that the booth was taken care of and stuff. So I didn't really have a whole lot of time to really kind of sit back and like look at it and be like, is there less people, more people, or anything like that? What we started doing with Space Bastards is because I'm doing New York Comic Con actually in October.
Oh, awesome!
And there's a few other shows we're doing in 2019 as well. And basically, what we ended up doing, just to kind of like attract more people and kind of separate us out from the pack a little bit more, is our booth is just a bar. So
nice!
It's the Space Bastards bar, so you can come over, sit in a stool, drink with some other Space Bastards, check out the books, all that stuff.
That's a great idea, and that's targeting in a way that's hitting your target demographic. Because, because I mean, let's face it. One thing, we've talked about it a lot. I get the impression that your target demographic is probably dudes like me, in their 30s with a bit of a disposable income, who enjoy drinking, right? And action movies. Action movies. I mean, it's not to say that that it's not for the kids, but I think there's a type of person, and you and I are definitely of that generation, where you grew up liking tough guys who drank beer and got in fights and had their own spaceship. Rogues. We were talking about it earlier, and you said Han Solo. That prototype badass is kind of like, I remember when I was a kid, I was like, oh, he's probably the coolest guy I've ever seen. And
that's the thing. Like it's I think it changes with years. Like for me, like one of the things I love the most about Space Bastards is originally it started off as this thing about one guy. And it really was born out of just kind of this adolescent desire to like hey, let's do so, like, just nobody's ever done at the time. I mean, obviously this changed this year, but at the time, nobody's done like smuggler stories. Let's just do a smuggler story. And then when we made the movies, it was like, well, what's the story of this? It can't just be a smuggler. Oh, you know what? The Postal Service. Like, how the hell does that work? And then eventually we kind of turned it into this death race thing, and then we made it kind of an ensemble cast. And honestly, by that point, when I was like 19, 20, in my 20s, honestly, like, the influences had changed. It wasn't just Transformers and Star Wars. It was by that point. By that point it was like 2000 AD. It was John Carpenter movies. It was The Wire. It was Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It was Quentin Tarantino movies. A whole lot of Quentin Tarantino movies. Kind of like all cobbles together to basically kind of make this really sort of unique world-building exercise that's actually quite like rated R.
So it's like a juxtaposition of all your favorite stuff. I mean, you ticked a lot of my boxes there. I mean, The Wire is my favorite TV show of all time.
Yeah, there we go. We're best friends now.
Yeah, I mean, I've never watched the TV show that's topped The Wire, and I have looked. Believe me, I have looked. And you mentioned, stuff like. I mean, like 2000 AD, it's funny because North American audiences don't really know that much about 2000 AD, but 2000 AD is kind of like a little satire, and a lot of allegory for, other things. Like Rogue Trooper is, it's an allegory for World War One.
Right.
Nemesis the Warlock is like, it's Pat Mills exploring the politics behind xenophobia and the resistance movement against that. It's Judge Dredd is a comment on fascism and imperialism, really. But it's also it's sugar coated for you in a way that it's also a great story. I mean, nowadays, and there's a lot of controversy around this because nowadays people, especially in the comic book industry, are coming under a lot of fire for being heavily political in their comic books.
Sure.
And the more I've spoken to creators, the more I sort of understand that, the politics has always been there. It's just that in past incarnations, it was coded in some really sort of amazing storytelling.
I always wonder about that, right? Because I was like, I mean, like, when was Thatcher in office?
Oh yeah, you're talking about the sort of start of the 1980s,
Right, and so like at that point, I mean, I'm a baby. I didn't really, but I all these like influences. I mean, 2000 AD, a lot of Alan Moore's work, during the. I mean, like a lot of that 2000 AD Vertigo stuff is like a lot of my staple of writers that influenced me and really taught me how to write. Kind of came out of this era of like punk rock writing, really.
Yes.
Right? But they're doing it in comics, and they can kind of get away with it at the time. And I wonder if I'm sorry, and I really, really don't want to get super political, but it's like I kind of have to wonder if it's 2018 and 2000 AD we're going to launch. First off, it wouldn't be called 2000 AD in 2018, but but if it were going to launch, would they actually be able to get away with it? I mean, that's kind of what I always wonder. Is whether or not.
I don't think they could, right? I honestly don't think they could because, if you look at today's environment, everybody's constantly being purity tested, okay? So, it's like I described it to Rich Hawkins. It's kind of like the Crucible. It's the Salem witch trials every day on social media. And people are looking for an excuse to get hysterical about everything, just everything. So if you were to put out a super edgy comic, and I've got to be honest, I think if something like 2000 AD came out nowadays, if it was attached to the counterculture at the start of the 80s was liberalism, okay? It was liberalism, and it was punk rock, and it was, fuck you to the establishment, and, fuck the fascist police force and all that sort of stuff. But if it came out now, liberalism is the establishment, and so it would probably be coming from a conservative bent. Because conservatism now is more, how could you say? I mean, it's more censored than liberalism.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And again, I'm over in America, so it's different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super divisive over here right now.
Totally. It's polarized in America right now. You've got an absolute political schism, Yeah.
So I don't know, really. I mean, I don't. To be honest with you, I kind of feel like both parties right now, in terms of the portrayal in the media, have problems. You know what I mean? And that's one of the biggest issues in America is, nobody's sitting there with like a torch up being like, follow me and I've got the way. It's more of a football game right now.
Absolutely. I mean, the way I describe politics, American politics in particular, again, it's tinfoil hat conspiracy time, right?
Sure.
I think that ultimately, whenever it comes down to politicians in Western countries, you're talking about figureheads who do the work of their campaign backers, right? So you've got somebody who probably wants to come in. They've got a bit of an agenda, but ultimately they're going to be fulfilling the wishes of their campaign backers, and that isn't the people. That is what conspiracy theorists or I guess woke journalists like to refer to as the deep state. So I'm, part of the reason I'm not hysterical about Trump is because whenever I was in America during George Bush's second term. He just got elected for his, second innings, and he'd taken the country into 2 wars. So people get hysterical all the time and say, "Oh, Trump, he's evil, he's a Nazi, he's this, he's that." And no such hysteria existed during Bush 2's tenure, and the reason why, I guess, is because social media wasn't as prevalent. Clickbait, sensationalist headlines weren't as prevalent. This wasn't the death of the mainstream media and the last sort of dying, thrashing attempts to bring in a readership through, this clickbait extravaganza. So I think people now are more hysterical than ever, and it has made them, it's basically made them more puritanical than ever, and that's why I'm saying, in terms of bringing out a something that was edgy, something that would attract to the counterculture, you couldn't do it because, well, you could do it, but you would be under intense scrutiny, and you'd have a lot of people wanting to shut you down. So it would be harder than ever, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it. I mean, and kudos to Pat Mills, John Wagner, and everybody for doing what they did when they did. I can tell you that to me is the craziest thing. Is like even all the way over in America, totally informed. That generation of writers completely informed how I write. Like it's hard for me to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine how I would write without those people that I grew up on. Which is kind of funny too because it's a lot of European. Writers basically like satirizing American culture, or there's a whole lot of other kind of like outward glances, looking in sort of stuff there. But I think that was kind of crucial for me. I can tell you, Space Bastards, we do the same thing. I mean, for us, it's more of like a examination of the great American dream, and that sort of thing. It's largely in our book America that is taken to the cosmos.
I totally got that reading it, and that's kind of like what I like about it, because America to me, especially the way you've sort of analyzed it, I think there's an America that people want to, they want to idealize, and they want to say, there's the American dream, and the idea that everybody can. Well, I mean, it's that old phrase, even the poorest people in America think they're temporarily financially embarrassed millionaires. It's a temporary thing. You can go on. I mean, there's that idea that you can ascend in America, and it's that immigrant mentality, I guess, where people came with big dreams, and you had this great constitution. You had a war to drive out, and the imperialism of Britain, and so our civil war, and so you had these great dreams, but also there's the underside of America, and that is the sort of the dirty underside, and that is that there's a lot of bad stuff happened in terms of whenever colonialists first came over. You had like massive genocidal purges, really. Then you obviously had slavery, and the third phase of American history is capitalism. And whether you think capitalism's good or bad, it makes fascinating stories, and it seems to me that you've really tapped into all of that. Whenever I'm reading your stuff, I'm going, he's taking a hard look at that culture, and he's writing a really entertaining, funny, satirical piece of storytelling. So, I mean, like I say, I'm really hoping whenever this comes out, it does great, because
Thank you.
it's exactly the sort of thing I want to read, you know?
Well, and that's kind of how I look at it too. Actually, just recently we were like doing all of our, our ad campaign stuff and looking at demographics and like what ads were successful and all that stuff. And that was kind of part of it too. Is like I ended up looking at the most successful part of that, and I'm like, oh, hey, it's me. It just happens that it's like it's guys like me and you, and it's dudes primarily between Europe and America, you know. But that's also just because we haven't really hit up Asia a whole lot or anything, and yeah. So I mean, it's that like that. I think definitely. I hope. I don't know, man. I hope that there's enough of me out there to make this palpable. You know?
Yeah. Well, dude, listen, you know, I think, you know, putting the word out there, talking to people, doing podcasts, things like that, just spreading the word. We have the power, especially as independent sort of agents, you have the power to put your stuff out there. It's a lot more difficult because, you know, like if you're a big studio, obviously, you have masses of money to pump into marketing campaigns and stuff. It is a lot more difficult, but it's that old 1,000 true fan theory. If you can get your 1,000 true fans, you know, you bring that little niche with you, and they can support a book. One thing I was going to ask you is, have you found, you know, as somebody independently marketing your own stuff, do you have a background in marketing, or?
I do. I ran a marketing company for 12 years.
Dude, well, you are perfectly positioned. I was wondering because you'd said it a couple of times, and I was like, hey, he seems to know what he's talking about here.
A little bit. There's always something. The thing about marketing is that like nobody cracks the code. I mean, like, you know, obviously the better budget that you have, the faster you will find your niche, and the faster things will take off. And so it just depends, you know. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like I've got, you know, we know kind of our targeted launch date and all that stuff, and kind of when we need to be at what stage of, you know, people signing up and all that. And so we have deadlines here. We have deadlines to try and get people to join the Postal Service, to try and sign up to be a Space Bastard, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. So constantly like reevaluating our marketing and seeing what else we can do out there to get the word out.
So also, whenever you're writing your characters, I mean, you know, is some of this drawn from your own personal experience? You know, having to work in an office.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that's crazy. Is like I was thinking about this the other day. And this is what it's like for me. I mean, this project, we started working with Darrick in 2014, right? And essentially every year we've gotten closer and closer to launch and all this stuff, and we've got other artists involved, and now it's like every time I open up my email, it's like it's Christmas all over again for me.
Yeah, sure.
And but really what it is that this project has been with me so long that it's kind of like, it's gotten to the point where I'm a little bit manic socially about it, just because it's like I'm a dad. I have like 3 kids. I have a 3-year-old son. I have a 1-year-old daughter.
Wow.
And then I have like a 15-plus-year-old comic book that's like set brain for it. You know, and the truth is that there's a little bit of me and my co-writer as well. I think and pretty much every cast member, and you know, we'll sit there. Him and I are pretty dialed in. We'll like work on a story idea, and it won't even come up. Like it won't even come up in conversation. Like, oh yeah, this scene is one of my most embarrassing moments that you actually witnessed, you know, that kind of thing. And it will just feel totally comfortable kind of being like, hey, this is way in the future in the, you know, interstellar cosmos or whatever, like, and it's a totally different guy, so it's kind of fun to explore all that stuff, you know.
I mean,
I was a CEO for like 12 years, and I got like, you know, and I've worked in sales like a long time.
Eric, what age are you, man?
I'm 30, what am I? I'm turning 36.
36?
January.
And you've been a CEO for 12 years? Wow.
I started young. I graduated high school when I was like 15, and then basically went to film school, and then started getting into like marketing production and stuff.
Yeah, sure. So you got in early. I mean, man, it makes me feel like a bum. I'm still sort of.
All that stuff comes with a cost, and that's kind of what the book, I think, in a way, is about. So
Well, it's funny. I think some of the most interesting writers. I see a lot of people. There are people who start in their 20s and stuff, and they're just prodigies, right? And they've just
just for the record, I am not, by the way.
Well,
yeah.
let the fans decide.
Okay.
The fans might decide that you totally are, But I mean, it's one of those things. I see a lot of writers. Well, I've read writers, I should say, who have been prodigies and they're in their 20s and they just, I don't know, maybe they have an old soul or something, and they can just write these really interesting, well-developed characters, and they can see into these environments. They've just got an amazing handle on things at a young age. I find though that it's mostly guys and girls who've lived a bit. They're maybe in their 30s or something, and they've seen a bit of life, and they, really deliver the characters for me, because they, it's not, it's not just some fanciful. I read a lot of comics nowadays, and it's all very meh. It's like I can't relate to any of the situations. The protagonists don't really have any challenges, and I think a lot of it comes back to, it's the young people writing them haven't really experienced that adversity that has rounded them out and made them interesting as characters yet, and so they can't inject that into their work. So, one of my favorite writers is Charles Bukowski. The reason I love Chuck Bukowski is because he writes some really horrible stuff about what happened to him in his early life, and like Ham on Rye, stuff like that. And you read about it, and it's horrendous, but at the same time, it is so you can empathize. It sucks you in. You can relate. Being at this stage in your life now, you've got a couple of kids, you've worked a long time in advertising, so you've got all this interesting stuff to bring to the characters,
Well, I think thanks, and I think even so. All right, so if you go on spacemasters.com, you can read like the first 16 pages of the main story for the first year.
Okay, so
anthology.
Spacemasters.com, right? Gotcha.
Yeah, and if you're in there, you'll kind of see like some of the stuff you talked about earlier. The accountant the Poindexter who kind of joins the space, the Intergalactic Postal Service out of necessity and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And you've gotten a preview copy and kind of read a little bit past there.
Yeah.
But like I've been laid off before. Like
Yeah.
I've like I would say this is that I think one of the things that stuck with me from a very, very young age was the sudden realization that like whatever lifestyle I'm living at that point, like nothing's ever safe. Nothing's ever safe.
Yeah.
Like, you think it is, you think like, cool, I went to college, I did all this or whatever, and like I got a good job or whatever. No, it's not safe. I mean, it's never safe. And so whenever you get that realization, like some sort of life experience or something that kind of like reminds you like, oh no, she left, or hey, yeah, you got laid off, you got fired, or whatever. I mean, like these things that are out of that sometimes things happen out of your control, sometimes they happen within your control, whatever it is. That realization that you're not safe changes a man, or a woman.
Yeah.
It changes kind of your outlook on life and everything. And then like that sudden realization that like you have to hustle, like you have to probably hustle for the rest of your life, And I mean that's Han Solo, right? I mean that's the thing.
That's exactly. Yeah.
We all think about like the fact that it's like cool. He's a cool dude with like a I'm gonna screw it up, but like a DL-44 blaster pistol, or like a you think about that. He's got the Falcon, he's got the big hairy co-pilot and all that stuff. No, I mean that stuff's all fun, but underneath there, what you really have is you have a guy who basically has realized like I got to run for the rest of my life. I have to run for the rest of my life, and that's kind of what for me personally is kind of one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I think I'm not the only guy to feel that way. I kind of think if I wrote a book about a bunch of guys who get tired of playing the game and decide to join the service and kind of live this alternate lifestyle and all that stuff, that might be a nice way for other people to blow off a whole lot of steam is by getting involved in that,
Yeah, that's
That's really, really interesting what you've just said, actually, because I think you've touched the core of the character of Han Solo, and it's something that people overlook because
Yeah.
they see the cool veneer, but the reality of
Right.
Han Solo is that Han Solo is a hustler, and it's the same as Lando Calrissian. He's a hustler,
Yeah.
and whenever you reach that, I've been laid off before, and what's interesting about it is in that moment, it's a make or breaker. You can either let it crush you, or you can try and dig yourself out of the situation, whatever way you can, whatever way you're programmed, you're gonna try and get out of that situation, and it's interesting because, for instance, whenever I went self-employed. I knew I was going to have to hustle to survive because it was an alternative way to live a lifestyle. But you're free because you don't have a boss and you don't have someone who's looking over your shoulder, breathing down your neck. But you're also having to bust your ass in order to pay the bills, and that's the definition of freedom in 21st century. Western society, I guess, is not having someone breathing down your neck, but also the self-reliance, and you've tapped into that. So yeah, that's very interesting.
Thanks. It honestly runs in my blood. It's one of those things. Like, it's a weird. I'm a weird guy. Like, I'm pretty.
I get that.
I'm pretty easy to get along with socially, and none of the stuff that we are talking about on this podcast would come out over a beer necessarily in my neighborhood, right? But we're talking about comics, and we're talking about where some of these ideas come from and all that, and it's that. Like, I work other jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
Before I had my marketing company, I was a TV producer for 5 years.
Oh, really?
And, yeah.
Wow.
And it's a whole story. It's a whole long thing. But just to kind of give you some insight, this was what happened. I mean, this is kind of a large part of where suddenly the idea of these characters kind of clicked, was that I was producing a very, very expensive, very, very it was a big show. It was a big show that did well. It was a daytime show, and it did well.
Okay.
And but I was very much paid for my age. I mean, I was paid. Sure. They took a chance on me, kind of saying, I was like, when I started working there, I think I was like 18 or 19 or something. And I was sleeping underneath my desk like twice a week and working easily like 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
Other members of my team would get let go because they realized, like, well, wait, Eric could just do this graphics package, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was pretty much, dude, I was living, at that age, it was kind of like if I made $1,500 in a month, I'd be okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was living hand to mouth and kind of thinking like, dude, actually, like, if they let me go, like if I'm always kind of under their thumb. If they let me go, I'm really screwed. Like, I'm really, really screwed. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I'm not safe at all,
Yeah.
And I'm really, like, sleep deprived and all that stuff. And that was really it. That was kind of when I kind of decided, you know what, if I got into a place with a bunch of roommates where I literally only had to make $300 a month to live, to pay my rent and utilities, I could handle food, all that, I could eat ramen, I don't care. But if I did all that, I could launch a company. I could actually do this. And that's really what started.
Okay.
And it was that whole feeling, of literally just like, this was really, this will be an emasculating statement for myself, but that whole feeling of being like hugging a pillow and being like, I'm in the middle of a hurricane. The only reason I feel safe every day is because of the society I live in. Like, all this stuff could go away. All this stuff goes away if I lose my job, which basically all I can do is just pray I do the best job possible, and like that won't happen, but of course it can happen. And so it's that, all those sort of feelings and all that stuff, like that's the stuff that, like, I try to dip into for the book, is that idea of, like, the false pretenses of kind of this, economy and everything that we live in,
You've explained it quite well, and I do understand what you're saying. You're talking about the idea that, it's very easy. I've done the cubicle monkey lifestyle, right? I've worked in a job, and it was a well-paid job, but I clocked in every day. My job was I used to chase people for references, so I'd get their references that they were okay to work on the job.
So you just to clarify, you were kind of on the recruitment side?
Yeah, well, it was sort of like that. I was outsourced by a company to another company, and essentially I was just like one of the cogs in the machine,
Right.
So all it was kind of like I just did the administration in human resources, So yeah, I mean I've done that job, and again, it's one of those things where you're clinging to it because you're like, oh, I need this stuff to live, and but you're not free, and while you've got that mindset, you can't really be free because it's I think they call it scarcity mindset, and so you're clinging to these resources thinking that nothing else will ever come along. But the reality is, if you just take the plunge and go out on your own and take a chance, you can survive. You will survive. And I remember I ran into my uncle outside one day, and I was walking down the street, and I remember I heard someone shouting, "Hey, ugly, ugly!" And I was like, "Who the fuck's that?" And I turned around, and it was my uncle, and I was like, "Oh, what are you?" So we were shooting the shit, talking, and he said, "So where are you working?" And I was wearing my suit and my tie, and I was like, "Oh, I work in I'll not say the company," but and he said, "What are you doing, prostituting yourself to the man?" And I said, "Man, I don't know. I fucking hate my job." And he said, "Well, why don't you just quit?" And I said, "Oh, I can't quit. I need." And he was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Oh, I want to do the writing," and And he said, "Then just fucking quit. Stop relying on the paycheck. Work out something else to do where you can make enough money to survive and do what you want to do." And that was like a fucking total epiphany for me. And I went in, and by the end of the week, a few things happened, but by the end of the week, I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not prostituting myself anymore.
It's one of those glorious moments. There's two sides to it, right? So when I made that plunge in my 20s, it was amazing. It was like, because it was scary as hell and all that stuff. And a lot of that is definitely that first issue. A lot of that goes into Davey, kind of like the trauma. Like any change is born out of trauma. And so unfortunately, it's never like a pleasant thing. Yeah. But you kind of have to go through it to kind of realize, like, I can do this, And then there's the other side of it, and just to get like super meta here, in order for us to finance this book, yeah, dude, I have to work for the man. I have to make sure that I actually integrate. I have to make sure that I'm able to be successful and integrate successfully in like a capitalist society and all this stuff. So it's really fun. I mean, it's like really crazy because like, I'm on the other side of it, and I also got like mouths to feed as well.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's kind of this thing where it's like. And that for me is that to me is actually really the core of Space Bastards. It's kind of a John Wagner thing. We won't tell you the right way. We're just going to show you some different sides here and show kind of the bittersweet side of this.
Oh, dude, totally.
Which is the fact is that if you read that first issue of Space Bastards, by the end of it, I think you kind of feel like, this is really great, and I wish I could do this. I wish I could join the Intergalactic Postal Service, and you can, by the way, by going to spacebastards.com.
Nice plug.
But the reality is like you read Space Bastards, and you should ideally kind of read that thing, kind of thinking like, I don't understand how these guys are going to be able to like last. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, listen, you said something really interesting there. You said it should be that bittersweet John Wagner style, and we're not going to show you the right way, because the truth is that there is no right way. There's only the way for you, right? I mean, but also, and this is interesting. I was talking about politics and how it's sort of that political overload that is sort of it's taken precedence over the story and a lot of modern stuff. Well, the way it works best is whenever you put the politics in there, but you don't. It's like you put the information out there, but you don't tell someone how to vote, right? You allow them to come to their own natural conclusions, and that is some of the most fine and subtle storytelling, the nuanced storytelling, and that is you've seeded your view in there. It's your view, but it's not being rammed down anyone's throat, and that I think that's a very clever way to tell stories.
I think it's yeah. Well, thank you. I think like it's weird, man, because I think a big part of it is that. I mean, I think some part of me has to realize, like, some part of me has to always have some sort of, like, Don Quixote adventure going on. Like, just to kind of keep myself sane and believe that, but then there's the other side, too, which is, like I can tell you the birth of my son. I mean, that was kind of the moment where I realized, like, all right, at that point I had separated from my company, and I was kind of doing freelance work and stuff for, like, 2 years, or maybe, like, a year and a half or a year. And, like, that was kind of that big realization, like, holy crap, I'm going to have a son to feed. Mm-hmm. I should maybe, like, start looking at, like, somebody else giving me money. And then basically out of everything, I was like, I think I could actually, I did a lot of enterprise sales, like high-level sales.
Yeah, sure.
When I was a CEO, our clientele was diverse and it was large. And, that was kind of the thing. It was like, I bet I could do okay at that. So that is the thing, is like for several years kind of like quite successful at sales. And so that means like also being kind of on the front line of hustling and like being on the front line of like, yeah, this could all go away if I have a bad quarter. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so you hustle. You deliver those packages, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah, for sure.
You just kind of keep adrenaline going and doing that. And then it's like I get home and it's like, all right, now I can like write this. Now I can be Batman and do my war on crime in the evening and write these stories about kind of hustlers, playing in the future for like where all of those. The cool thing about fiction writing is that like everything, you can play with metaphor like so much more nuanced and so much on a larger scale,
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
whereas. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the fact that you're doing all that and you're juggling all that stuff is totally commendable. I mean, like kids, they say kids are the fastest route to poverty. So the fact that you're juggling so much stuff, you're back in the Space Bastards. You've got 3 kids, man. That's a lot to juggle. So fair play to you. I couldn't do it. I could not do it. I'm just not.
Yeah, like I said, it's kind of weird. It was just this. I went through this whole like Bruce Wayne Batman thing, where basically it was like, I really want to do this book. I really want to do these creative ventures where I actually, through different means, we're able to really kind of enable this in ways that are pretty unique. Like I don't think, to be honest with you, I think if I started this, I think we will end up having like an additional publisher with Space Bastards.
Sure. Okay.
But the boutique package will be this fan club, this way of doing it this way, But the that's not going to go away. Like I'm dead set on that. But there's a weird thing that happens where it's kind of like, well, if I was doing this, like let's just say I worked at like, I don't know, this unnamed successful publisher, right? Okay. I don't think there's a possible way that basically I would be able to develop Space Bastards the way that it has. Like I don't think there's any way in the world that would happen where I'd be able to be like, where I'd be able to like call up like my editor and be like, well, hey dude, you know what? We're not just going to do one story. We're going to do several stories that run alongside each other. And I'll tell you something else. This like artist who's costing us X amount. Yeah, we're gonna do like 4 of those at the same time. And they're going to be these big names. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like it's really, really. This whole thing has been really unique and has come around in a way simply because of that whole Batman thing of being like, all right, I'm gonna try, and I'm involved. I'm a co-owner in a bunch of different business ventures as well. So it's kind of like, all right, we're gonna take the day and kind of manage this stuff the best way we can. So that way, in the evening, I can actually afford to fuel up the Batmobile.
Yeah,
sure. The Batmobile takes like $800 to fill up and probably gets like 4 miles to the gallon. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's actually a really good analogy. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. Editors, in terms of editorial, what you're doing now, I don't know how that would play out at a conventional publisher. It's one of those things. My dealing with editorial, I have a 2-tier view of it. I think good editors are amazing and entirely necessary, especially for someone like me. I have a tendency to be quite loquacious, ramble on. You may have noticed.
Sure.
But the other end of it is if you get like a bad editor, it will really cramp your style, and especially whenever you're wanting to do something that is maybe outside the box. It doesn't want to play by the conventional rules. You know, it's important. It's important that you don't let. I mean, you have to know whenever someone's giving you advice and it's artistic advice and it's going to help you, but you also have to know whenever it's going to hinder you. And I've heard some horror stories of people who, you know, felt like their creative vision was ground to dust under editorial heel. Do you know what I mean?
Well, so there's a few different sides to this. So on one side, real quick, I'll just say this, is that we don't have an editor, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for my co-writer when I say, like, yeah, we wish we did. Like, it takes up a ton of time for us to go through at every stage, right? I mean, I'll try to keep this as short as possible. But you write, you know, we'll do the outline. I don't pen a script until I have an artist for that specific issue. I write my scripts for the artist. Case in point, like I said, Simon's story, I tilted that outline on its head, and it was still the same story, but it was definitely structurally changed to play to Simon's strengths. So I don't really write. I do like a really really detailed. We do like a really really detailed outline. Then we do we have to actually write the script once we have the artist on board, and that outline has to be as detailed as possible, because typically those scripts have to be written pretty quickly, and then. Because we don't have an editor, right, what happens is, like, we get those pencils back. We're the ones that have to kind of, like, look at them and be like, all right, is this going to be on point? Like, is this character going to look close enough to his representation by other artists and all that stuff? Then we get the inks. Then basically we handle all those changes, any continuity stuff, anything where we're like, no, you know, the bracelet, the postal bracelet on the hands changed hands, and the gun's in the wrong, you know, all that stuff. Like, this character here in the background looks too similar to one of our main characters. We can't do that. You know what I mean?
That is a crazy amount of work.
No, it's a ton. It's a ton of stuff.
It's crazy.
And then basically we have to do the lettering script. So there's a second script, right, where you go one other pass through and make sure all your dialogue is final. And then you also do, when things are getting colored. It's the same thing going through. It's the exact same process over again, where you're going through and you're like, the hair tone just isn't quite.
Jeez! Oh my God! Well, I don't envy you, but I have seen. You know.
So when we talk about editors, like, I definitely, like, there's times where I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I'm like, oh God, like, I wish I knew, like, Karen Berger, or you know, I don't know, like, any of my favorite editors that I know. I'm like,
Karen Berger was probably my favorite editor. Karen Berger, Bob Schreck, Pat Mills. I'm trying to think who else is really good on the.
I have to be careful with that too, because I know officially, like, some of my artists would probably be like you don't know nothing, Peterson. Like, I can tell you about the best editors in the world, you know, and rank them. And unfortunately, I haven't really worked with an editor, so I couldn't really do that. You know what I mean? So I'm speaking from the assumption side of the fence there, you know.
Have you met Steve McManus at all? I meant to mention Steve McManus.
I feel like I've met Steve once.
Enniskillen?
I think I did. Was that where it was? I did those two trips, like, back to back. I did Ireland, and then I did Bristol right afterwards. So it's hard for me to remember exactly who was at who.
Yeah, Steve.
I can tell you, Glenn was at both.
Glenn, that's Glenn Fabry. Yeah, man. If there's a convention within, spitting distance, Glenn's gonna be at it. That's just he loves the local con circuit. It's just an excuse for him to get blitzed, man. That's all it is.
So he's one of my favorite people. I always like my late night, like, hey, everything else is dying down. I've got a cigar here. Like, let's see if anybody else is around. Like, Glenn's my favorite people.
Listen, man. When we were in Lawgiver in Bristol, Glenn, right? This is true story. I'll tell you. I don't know if you remember this, but we stayed up to 4:00 in the morning drinking, and I was downstairs drinking with Bizley and Trillian Brass and a couple of John Burtis, all the guys from the cosplay guys. And
if this is the story about me near the end of that night, I don't.
No, it's not, right? It's about Glenn, right? So so anyway, we went upstairs to go to bed, right? So we're going up to the hotel room, and Glenn, who wasn't on our floor and wasn't supposed to be in our room, we found him lying on the floor, sleeping outside our room. So I don't even know how he knew where it was.
No, I think. And then I hung out with Glenn the next evening.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with Henry Flint.
Oh,
Simon,
yeah.
Glenn, and Henry's like at this point, like, I would consider Henry almost like a close family friend that I see like once every year. You know, like,
for sure.
I love Henry, but basically it was maybe like it was getting near the end of the evening and everybody kind of shoved off, and then like Glenn was still around, and then ended up hanging out with him and just having a really memorable.
Well, dude, when we took Glenn into the room, right? So we got him in the room, and then Bizley appeared. And bear in mind how shit-faced we were by this stage. So we get Glenn into the room, and Glenn is sleeping at the bottom of the bed. Me and Ryan are kind of like spooning, and Bizley, I don't know where Bizley was. I think he was on the bed as well, right? So, we're all in the room, and then security came because we were making so much noise. So Bizley had to defuse security, and then I was passing out blocked on the bed, and all I heard was Glenn get up, and he went, "Fuck it, I am leaving," and he disappeared. And dude, we were down on the convention floor the next day, and everyone was like, "Where the fuck is Glenn?" He left his shoes and his glasses in our room, right?
Yeah.
Someone had found him, like outside of the hotel. He got kicked out by security. Someone had found him, got him shoes, and got him a pair of glasses, and brought him to the convention bang on time. I was like, how the fuck does he do it? How does he do it? He's like, he is one of the most. There's stories, you know.
I ended up hanging out with him that second night. Outside, we were just smoking, and I would run inside. The greatest thing, by the way, I mean, I'm in America where like this does not happen, but like the greatest thing I love about that was like I could go into like the lobby desk, not even the bar, like the lobby desk, and be like, "Hey, 2 Coronas or like 2 Guinnesses, whatever," and they'd be like, "Yeah, you're coming right up," and he'd like walk over to the bar, and it'd be like, it'd be like 5 a.m, and he'd grab him, and then it's like I go bring him outside, and like Glenn and I are just watching, like music on YouTube and trying to like pick songs that we don't think the other person knows, you know,
man.
like hey, have you heard these guys? All this stuff. I end up doing that, and then eventually I see like dads coming out to have their like coffee and cigarettes at like after breakfast, you know, and I'm like, and then I had to do what Glenn did to you the previous night. I had to be like, "Hey Glenn, dude, this has been great. I have to go."
Dude, honestly,
I need to go sleep.
He's a fucking machine. He's a machine.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything like it. It's just it's just you need to top him up with booze every now and again, and he just keeps going. He just keeps going. I see him about once a week, once a fortnight for a cup of coffee.
And I'll say this too. I mean, like we talk about the antics and all that stuff, but the truth is like I can tell you with Glenn too is that like I've had so many great conversations with him. I mean, I've now known him for like a few years, and like. It's always been a real treat. So.
And you know, the fact that you're having those conversations, because Glenn doesn't just open up to everyone. He's quite a quiet guy, so the fact that you're having those conversations, you know.
I will tell you this, and I'm probably going into territory where I probably need to shut my mouth here soon. But like, but I'll tell you like the thing about Glenn that I always like. It's become like at first it was kind of like I would always kind of be surprised, but then I've kind of gotten used to it now to where I'm like, oh yeah, it's Glenn. It's like whenever I see him at a show, especially these like international shows I go to where I'm pretty jet lagged and all that, I'm just kind of like along for the ride for that first night. I can count on every time I see him it being that. Like we have to pretty much every time I hang out with him I kind of have to push the reset button. Like I kind of have to be like, hey, it's gonna take us like it'll take us a few handshakes here or whatever to get back into like friendly conversation mode.
Oh,
like
sure.
Yeah.
That's just standard. But you know what? He's a nice bloke, and he's hopefully he and I are supposed to be working on a Future Shock, but he busted it. Yeah, he busted his clavicle whenever he was in Miami.
Yeah.
So he fell and busted his clavicle. I think he's just coming back. He's back from Brazil this week, I think. And he said he was gonna. He said we would do a podcast and would talk about the breakdown of a Future Shock. So that may yet happen, but I'll have to see what condition he's in.
Sure.
Now that he's returned from Brazil with his, I think he had his daughter Kitty with him. So I'll swing over and see them this week. I'll tell them. Obviously, you said hi.
Yeah, tell him I did. Yeah, and obviously wish him the best and everything.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think what were we talking about last? We were talking about.
Well, I do want to say about the editor thing that was kind of weird.
Editorial, too. That's what it was. Yeah,
but I can't quite remember what I was.
Editorial. Yeah, you were talking about editorial, and man, you know what? If you're ever stuck for an editor, I think I've got a couple of guys who might be able to help you out pro bono.
I'm open to the idea, man. I mean, like, definitely, we should talk about it after the podcast because, like I said, that is definitely, that's always the part of it. We have a certain standard of quality, and I'm sure it annoys some people and stuff like that, but it's also it annoys us because we have to sit there and be the ones to be like, we gotta. Are we gonna be happy? Are we gonna be happy with this thing? When it's out there, it's out there. Like, you can never take it back.
Oh, totally.
Are we going to be happy without fixing this? No. All right, then we got to ask to get it fixed. We got to figure out a way to do this.
Well, I've got a couple of guys who might be able to help you pro bono, so we'll have a chat about that after the podcast. Okay. And I don't think they'll be offended if you don't like their style or whatever. But I just the sheer amount of work that you're having to do, man. It's a fight. That's a fucking load. And on top of the day job and having all the kids and stuff, so that's a lot to be getting on with. But
don't judge me by that. By the way, it all comes down to time management. I'm very proud of being able to handle.
You must be. You must be, man, because that honestly, that's a juggling act that I'm not sure. I just don't. I don't think I could do it. Kudos.
You'd be spread. I think I always think about this oh God, this will sound horrible, but it'll sound way worse than it really is.
Just say it, man. Get it out.
But it's I would think back to for the longest time, I would think that being a TV producer was the most stressful time of my life, right?
Yep.
And then I'd feel stressed at other points in my life and be like, well, maybe this is the most stressful. And I'd try to connect the dots and be like, was I really was it more manic and more crazy when I was doing this thing or whatever? And then eventually what happens is you just kind of realize hey, it doesn't really matter. You just have to figure out a way to file things to be hey, this thing we're not working on this thing right now. This thing you're going to work on later. So just put this away and literally do not think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's nothing. I know this person might be sounding. They say that they've got a huge issue that you need to take care of or whatever, but you just have to you have to think about the worst case scenario and think will this thing be okay if I come back to it in an hour?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, it will. Okay, then I need to not worry about this at all.
That's good strategy.
It's all that, and it does not come easily. I think it takes a long time to kind of get used to that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I read once that basically they did a study, and it was found that your stress response, the human stress response, will adapt to your situations anyway, right? So say the situation. So say you're at war or something. You're a Marine and you're in a war zone and you're super stressed out, right? So that would cause you massive amounts of stress, and then you come home and maybe you've got PTSD or whatever, and you go to the doctors, you go to therapy, whatever. But there will always be things in your life that cause you, stress to varying degrees, but I'm not saying not being in a war zone or something I don't know, being getting laid off at work or going through a divorce or a horrible accident happens to you. So there's varying degrees of stress, but your stress levels will adapt to your situation anyway, to the point where somebody who's maybe just having a bad day in work could be as stressed as somebody who's, living on the streets in terrible condition. So your stress levels kind of adapt, and that's I think I was reading in the article, it said that somebody who has no money and who is absolutely impoverished, and their levels of stress will be similar to the person who is rich and has a good lifestyle and has little sort of minuscule problems comparatively, but those little problems cause them as much stress. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. So like I just spent, until very recently, I spent about 8 months commuting across the United States for work.
Wow.
So
yeah, okay.
basically, like, and in fact, when I met you, it was literally, like, that was the craziest day, because I was in Alabama for work, and it was like forecast day. I had to put it in this thing, and it was, there was a math issue in it. It was off slightly, and then I was like dealing with my boss, having to deal with all that stuff, and it was like, my day started at like 7 a.m. Like, people being like, why aren't you picking up your phone? And it's like, dude, it's 7 a.m. What are you talking about? And then basically being like, I was flying out of Atlanta to Heathrow to come to Bristol for the lawgiver, and I find out my boss is actually flying through Atlanta at the same time I am. So then, like, him and I went and had a beer together, and he's a good friend of mine. And by the way, he's also a 2000 AD fan. Which
great, even better.
And he's actually, funny enough, he's from Galway Bay. So anyways, he was all excited at my European trips, Enniskillen and
small world.
And we kind of like had a beer and like made sure like the marriage didn't go to bed angry, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
And like everything's taken care of, we're all good. Then I hop on an overnight, like a red eye, over to Heathrow. Then I jump on like I was so tired, I meant to take a train or a bus over to Bristol from Heathrow. But I'm so tired I didn't do that. I just gave like a bunch of money to the taxi driver just to get me over there. And he's like, you sure you want to do this? I was like, yes, I need to sleep like right now. And then I get over into Bristol and basically like I like get my stuff up in the room and I'm like, I'm going to go have a beer and then I'm going to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I'll try and see who's out. And as I'm getting my beer, I like turn around and Simon's there. And then I don't go to sleep.
Mate. Because Bizley's going to make you drink. He's going to make you drink.
Of course. And then, but more importantly than that, it's Simon. It's one of the guys, I came out to see him.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, I'm not at the point, I'm not wise enough to be like, oh, hey, I'll see this guy when I wake up.
Yeah, I know. Oh, man, that's...
let's get going, and all that. But like, anyways, I think the thing with stress is that, like, another way of coping with stuff, and this is, again, kind of a Space Bastards thing. Again, it won't make a lot of sense to your listeners, but it might once they eventually read the first issue.
Yeah.
Is that if you sit there and dwell on how much you're handling, or you're dwelling on, like, people issues, 9 times out of 10 for me, it's people issues. It's like, well, this person's really upset about this, and I gotta, like, try and make this problem go away and fix this thing. If you sit there and dwell on all that stuff and you think about why is this happening to me, or why did I get laid off, or why did this happen or that happen or whatever, you're going to be dealing with it in a certain way. If you can somehow train yourself to deal with it in the way of thinking about the work and what has to get done, then you don't really have time to think about stress. Meaning,
I mean,
and again, you think about Davey and Manny in that first issue, where it's like, Manny's full on. I mean, that's kind of the thing with Davey, is realizing the idea of like, the idea of like, I don't have a home, I don't have anything, and I need to wait, but like, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anywhere else to go. I have to deliver this package.
Yeah.
I got to get this done, and that's another kind of little thematic thing in the book that I think is pretty prevalent or important to us. Is the sort of idea of like, of just looking at things. It's tough. I don't know the right wording for it.
I know, I get it. I understand. I think what I got from it anyway, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it was a story ultimately about survival and adversity, right? And you're applying that, you're sort of using your own situation as an example, and that I get it, because it's another thing, and it relates to art as well. I think great art great storytelling. I think it comes from, it was something we were talking about earlier too. People who've been around a bit longer have more, I feel they bring more to the table, especially these people who aren't just, some sort of prodigy in their teens or 20s or whatever. I think people with a lot of history, a lot of experience and experience with adversity have interesting stories to tell. And that translates into those protagonists, and it allows you to empathize with them, because ultimately, as a species, what brings us together is our ability to empathize and relate to other people. Like, communication. I heard an interesting sort of fact the other day, and that was the majority of our use of language is used to translate gossip. And what do we gossip about? We gossip about, usually grim things that fascinate us, and those things all relate to, our as a species, as groups and tribes and cultures or whatever, our attempts to survive in the climate that we're in. So you condense that down into Space Bastards, and you can feel that you've pumped that into it. So that's why I enjoyed it. Relatable protagonists who have genuine adversity, and like I say, it feels like something that was missing from a lot of I read various titles here and there, but some of them feel like they're very meandering. There isn't anything to be learned from them. It's just, it's just a lot of posturing and, political punditry, whereas I think there's core human life lessons and values that you can take from things, and in the case of Space Bastards, it's probably, perseverance under adversity, and, that very human core survival thing. So, that's interesting. Before I finished speaking, I don't know if you've ever read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger.
No, I haven't, no.
Well, what I found interesting about it was it talks about, he was a war correspondent, and so he spent a lot of time out in Afghanistan, with groups of soldiers, and he struggled to adapt to life coming home. And so he did a lot of research, and he put it together in a book. And what he found was that people actually have better mental health whenever they're struggling against something than whenever they've got it very easy. And if you look at the hedonistic melting pot of 21st century Western society, there's more mental health issues, there's more depression, there's more, general unhappiness than there have been in previous generations. And it's because this generation, in a lot of ways, has it quite easy comparatively,
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And by the way, too, in terms of Space Bastards, I'm happy to hear that you kind of, at least, are on the same wavelength as me with that stuff too. Like for us, we definitely kind of. I think it's an exercise. A lot of these guys are pretty crude guys, Yeah. So for us, it's kind of an exercise in using empathy to still make you really care about these these protagonists that you might kind of otherwise be like, why do I? See any value in this human at all?
Yeah. Well, I worked.
But that's not how empathy works. And the way empathy works is that no matter how bad they smell, if you guys are talking about something similar or whatever, you're going to something relatable. Then you're going to understand each other. There's going to be some sort of bond.
Oh yeah, totally. And that's the thing. There's something once you strip past the veneer. Ultimately, we're animals, and we have. Things at base level that, regardless of what your culture is or what your religion is or what your, eating habits are or whatever, any of the bullshit veneer, once you get right past it, the things that actually bring us together as people are these core human values. And, I related to the guys in Space Bastards because, they appealed to me at a base level because I used to work in door work. I was a bouncer for years, and so you had the Manny, who's a total bastard and a really big tough sort of uncompromising guy. And I was like, oh, I like this guy already. He appeals to me. He reminds me of Lobo. He reminds me of guys that I've worked with. But, you know, as the story goes along, you realize that he's more of a nuanced character. And what do you call it?
That's right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's so, I mean, that's what I liked. The initial thing that drew me to it wasn't what made me stick around. It was the interesting nuances, you know?
Oh, that's great. No, that's awesome. It's weird for me to hear somebody, you know, tell me the things that I kind of hope.
Yeah. Well, writers, artists get feedback all the time, right? Because you can stick your art up online and people go, "Oh my god, that's amazing." With writers, you've got to make somebody fucking read it, and sometimes that is hard to do. And especially when you're aiming at a niche market where, you know, there aren't that many people interested in reading stuff anymore. So you know, I'm not saying, oh, poor us, pity us, but I'm just saying, you know, writing, you know, especially if you've got a script or something, trying to get someone to read it is a fucking pain. It's a real pain. And, you know, sometimes I wish I was an artist so I could just go, hey, look at this beautiful rendering of something I've done, and people would go, oh, that's amazing, and I could get that instant gratification instead of having to...
You know, adversely too, I always hear like the same thing from artists too.
Oh, really?
Artists I work with will be like, I really want to write a story, man. I really want to get out there as a writer and stuff too, you know. So it is always kind of the, you know,
grass is always greener, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think also we're all creative people, and we kind of want, you know, to explore, you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean,
I know for sure that I would not be the type of writer I am if I was also an artist. I don't have enough time to actually, I think, work on both traits. You know?
Oh, well, I mean, I think people who are both writer and artist are, you know, it's a phenomenal talent. And
it's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, it allows you to have your cake and eat it. I was reading Joelle Jones' run on Catwoman at the minute, and her art is phenomenal. But, you know, so's her story, and I look at that and I'm so jealous. I'm like, you know, for fuck's sake, you know, why? I mean, you know, not only can you produce a really brilliant script, but you know, your artwork is also phenomenal. I mean, like, you know, it just makes me embarrassed for the stick man that I would be sticking in, you know, sticking in boxes on a page trying to make a script out of, you know, but yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to wrap this up soon because I gotta get ready for work. But what I will say is it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, man, and we got to do this again sometime soon. You know,
yeah, I would absolutely love to. It's a lot of fun. So,
well, you know, maybe running up to the whenever Space Bastards is coming out. Or if anytime you've got anything that you wanna talk about or promote or anything, you know, all you gotta do is give me a shout, man, because I'd be delighted to have you on.
I'll tell you right now, one idea before I go is just you know, I have one of the most pleasant parts of this whole process for me has been, like, I've got so many stories, man, from just like Google-eyed little, and the truth is like actually in my meeting of these artists, like, you know, it's never that way. It's always like a few days later when I'm back home and I'm sleeping and I go, oh my God, what did I do the last week? Like, I went to Bristol and all this, you know. I've got so many different crazy stories with people who are my friends, but also people who I grew up reading their work and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, if you ever wanted to, we could definitely make a show out of one by one going through a lot of the Space Bastards lineup of artists that I've grown up with and talking about my experiences with them, how great it's been, what it's like working with them, also too, like how we met and some anecdotes about you know, what they're you know, what kind of it's been like behind the scenes here.
Dude, that sounds absolutely great, and I mean, it sounds like exactly what I mean. I think our listeners would love that, especially you know, some of the guys you've been working with, like you say, Darrick Robertson, Simon Bizley, Colin MacNeil, you know, Boo Cook. Well, I mean, what a lineup! So yeah, that sounds awesome. So we'll definitely.
I'll tell you. I can tell you this too, just real quick about Colin too.
Sure.
Is that, like, Colin, I have a ton of memories with because he's just such a unique character, and he's just such a gentleman and such a great guy too. So I would love to prattle on and on and on about that.
Oh man, big time. Well, he's done some of my favorite strips. I mean, everything from Nemesis to America to Martial Law. I'm actually reading his final League of Extraordinary Gentlemen with it's like the addendum to the series with Alan Moore at the minute, and he's just, I mean, that guy has played like a pivotal role in my my comic book reading sort of history, you know. I mean, I've been tuned into this stuff for a long time, so I can't wait to see what he's going to do on Space Bastards. I'm really looking forward to it. So everybody, go check out Space Bastards on spacebastards.com and subscribe and get ready for the hardback, because I can tell you, based on the preview stuff that I've read already, it kicks ass. I really enjoyed it, and I think Eric, you're gonna do great out of this one, man. I'm looking forward to seeing it come out, and like I say, we'll get together and do this again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great. And by the way, if you sign up for spacebastards.com, we're emailing out newsletters, kind of a lead up to when everything launches, kind of behind the scenes looks and works in progress from a lot of these artists and whatnot too. So if you really do kind of want to experience this whole thing in the months leading up to it being released here early next year, then definitely log into spacemasters.com and sign up for the newsletter, because that's where all the news is at. So
awesome. Well, I encourage everyone who's listening and everybody who loves good comics to go do that. And yeah, I guess that's it. Well, listen, Eric, it's been a pleasure having you on, guys.
Likewise, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, man.
No problem, dude. It's been my pleasure. And listen, guys, as always, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. So let me know what you think of the show. Let Eric know what you think of Space Bastards. Go over and check it out, and we will see you next time on Considering Comic Books. Okay, so
perfect, man.
That was great. That one.
Good.
Are you happy?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Good. Thanks for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, please comment below. I'd love to hear from you. You can follow me at Consider Comics on Twitter. That's Consider_comics, and you can check out my own work with my artistic collaborator, very talented Ryan Brown, over at his website, ryanbrownart.com, where the first part of our free online webcomic, Esther the Relique, is available for free. Please enjoy, and if you like it or hate it, and you've got any criticism or feedback, we would love to hear from you.